Hi, I'm Pete. I am a music producer and a synth builder. Seon Modular is a company here in Chiang Mai, Thailand. 3 years down the line, we've got a range of about 15 eurorack modules, and we sell from here to all over the world.
I'm Steve. I'm a technology journalist by day and a music producer and musician by night.
VLH, or VCO's Little Helper, is a 2-oscillator input ring modulator, a subdivider and noise circuit with a nifty little through feature, and it's all in 2 HP.
The VLH gives your VCO section in your eurorack superpowers, essentially adding vintage features in the smallest amount of HP on the market. I'd written this article for TechCrunch called Meet the Makers of Modular, looking at all the boutique manufacturers, that I came up with my own eurorack module I did, but I hadn't really had the time to get it anywhere. And then I think it was in late 2019 that I reached out to Pete and the Takaab Modular team.
Steve was just happy to give me the idea and let me run with it, as long as he got to get one. But I thought it'd be a bit more fun just to collaborate and work together.
Which secretly was the answer I really wanted. And the collaboration began. The inspiration came from my love of synthesizers from the 70s and early 80s, particularly classics like the ARC 2600, the ARC Odyssey, the Mini Mode, of course, and even synths like the Roland SH101 or the very iconic Korg MS-20. And even though those synthesizers, the sound is very much shaped by the VCO and the filters, but additional to that, they often had circuits such as noise, a ring modulator, or a sub-oscillator that gave those synths some of the colour and some of the planets of sound that we all recognise.
Me and Steve both have a similar view on synthesis. We're both quite East Coast, and it just fitted with that mindset.
The initial idea was a ring modulator in 2 HP, but with the addition of a through, which was an idea where you could reuse whatever you put into input A and input B elsewhere in your eurorack system without resorting to stackable cables or having to buy a multiple module for that purpose. And then I think it was through a conversation with DivKid that I came up with the idea of adding a noise section too. And then when I came to Pete at Takaab Modular, we quickly brainstormed and he suggested adding a sub-divider or 2 sub-dividers.
What I came to sort of call it an oscillator expander that sat there with your oscillators and added the extra sound sources and textures that you needed.
One of the design constraints of the VLH right from the beginning is that it had to be 2 HP. At the time I was obsessed with trying to pack as much functionality into my eurorack case as I possibly could, but I soon discovered that really small modules have a trade-off, a negative trade-off in usability. However, there's one exception. A 2 HP module that only has sockets doesn't really suffer from any of the downsides of being so small.
It did everything it needed in such a small footprint that it just seemed like a no-brainer. Up to the released version, there's been 8 iterations. So there was a few tests here before, just on breadboard and scraps of protoboard. But from the first sort of proto version I sent Steve up to the release candidate, it's been 8 versions.
One of the things that Pete was committed to right from the start was that this was going to be a true collaboration between him and I. And that meant sending me prototypes and involving me in all of the discussions along the way, so that the module not only met the original specification, right, the original design brief, but it actually would sound good, right, and that we would optimize for how it would be used in a musical context.
Uniquely, perhaps, for this project is that the original idea and the final product are very, very close. There's been very little budge. I mean, it's testament to how sort of strong Steve's idea was from the beginning.
Yeah, it's true. I did indeed blow up the first prototype, although I'm never ever going to do that again.
Oh, it's a rite of passage. It happens all the time here.
I remember I was like so excited to put it into my case that I jammed it in and wasn't very careful. And after about 10 minutes of testing, I saw a puff of smoke appear, panicked, switched off the power, and luckily everything was okay except for the module, which was completely ruined.
And I'm sure Steve will do it again sometime. Living out here, I do everything across continents, you know. So, you know, it slowed everything down having to post versions to Steve to take a go of before we move across to the next prototype. But yeah, then COVID hit, and that slowed everything down even more.
In the technology industry, there's a saying that people often use, which is that hardware is hard. And there's no doubt that working across time zones and across 2 different continents did slow things down. However, it was really when the pandemic struck that things changed.
Thailand at the beginning of the outbreak closed their borders, and that included Thai Post shutting down internationally.
It was also that every phone call I had with Pete kind of took on a slightly different tone, and it would begin with, how you doing, are you staying safe? And I myself, because of my disability, I've had to be shielding the entire time. So that was slightly surreal. On the other hand, the fact that the progress of the module was developing so nicely and it was so nice to collaborate gave that whole period of the initial shock of the pandemic a very welcome distraction.
I'm very happy with the whole thing. But the main thing is that it is so bang on to our original spec.
I couldn't be happier with the outcome. It's so much fun to see a back of the napkin idea go all the way through to a commercial release.
We didn't have to compromise with anything as we designed it. We found we could make something that was exactly what Steve and I had talked about even in our first conversation, really. And there was very little budging from that. So that in itself is that's amazing.
It's nice to realise that the original thesis, that a ring modulator in 2 HP coupled with a noise section and subdividers and a nifty little through feature would be something that would resonate with other people.
It was something I wanted in my rack anyway. I've always had it in the back of my mind. I was going to make a ring modulator and sub because I wanted them. So it's good to be able to realize those ideas and to do it all in one module and be so pleased with the results. Pretty cool.